Hello, this is Justin Williams with the Wolfpacker Podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by co-host and editor of the Wolfpacker.com, Matt Carter. And today, we're going to do a little bit of reflecting over what the weekend was for Wolfpack fans in both football and basketball. NC State getting a big win on the football field, beating Syracuse 41-17. Moving on to 8-3, entering the last week of the season against arch rival UNC with a chance to still go to the ACC Championship game. We thought all hope was lost after the loss to Wake Forest. There's still hope for the Wolfpack. We will talk about it. We will also talk about Kevin Keatts and the NC State Wolfpack men's basketball team getting another W at home against Texas Southern. Maybe not in as dominating fashion as some fans wanted, but as Matt Carter would like to remind you on the message board and some of the content at the Wolfpacker.com, if you were a member of the Wolfpacker.com, you would have known that the Texas Southern game was going to be a tricky task for the Wolfpack. So we're going to get into all that, but before we do, some housekeeping. I'm going to say it over and over and over again. As our viewers know, you know it already. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen to us. We are on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, everywhere you listen to podcasts. Plus, you can also watch us on YouTube, and we ask you, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It helps us out tremendously. Give this video a thumbs up, drop a comment. Been getting some great comments recently. I love some of the comments on the most recent basketball pod, so shout out to you guys for the good feedback. Other than that, the Wolfpacker is on the On3 network now. If you're a regular listener to this podcast, you know that, but I'm going to keep reminding you, if you haven't already, spend $1. Take your wallet out right now. For $1, you're going to get premium years worth of premium subscription to the On3 network, which includes the Wolfpacker.com, all the great work that Matt Carter does at the Wolfpacker.com. Premium analysis, recruiting information. Just, you're going to know everything about NC State sports before everybody else does. And isn't that worth $1? So go take advantage of that deal now. It's not going to be around forever. So go do that. All right, Matt, let's talk about some sports. Let's start with the football team, the team that Wolfpack fans love to claim right now. This football team that keeps on keeping on, that keeps on bouncing back from adversity. You know, every win or every loss this season on the football field has put a real stink in the air with the fan base. Oh, we can never beat an SEC team when you go down to Starkville and you lose by 2 touchdowns. Oh, we lost another game we should have won at Miami, a 1-point loss to a team that, don't look now, but is actually pretty good. Oh, we always stumble when opportunity is upon ourselves, the 3-point loss to Wake Forest. But you know what NC State has done every single time? It's lost a game this year. It's come back the next week and reminded you why this team is a good team. The defense stepped up yet again, shut Syracuse out. You know, yes, they got their rushing yards, but Syracuse can't throw the football, and they really couldn't throw the football against NC State. And we talk about it over and over and over again. Dave Doran's favorite phrase, complimentary football. And if you are a fan of complimentary football, I think Dave Doran might be the #1 fan of complimentary football in the world. Well, he sure was a fan of that second quarter, which was, if you look up complimentary football in the dictionary, that second quarter for NC State was the definition of it. A defensive touchdown, a special teams touchdown, and an offensive touchdown. Two very explosive offensive touchdowns. So, Matt, had your thoughts on the Syracuse game? I mean, it's not the big win. It's not the characteristic win, but if you really think about it, it might have been the best game for NC State thus far this season, just in terms of a complete performance.
Yeah, it kind of like when the game's over, you forget that in the first half, they didn't play very well, right? First quarter, I should say. It seems like forever that, midway through the second quarter, we were wondering if this was going to be a repeat of that kind of 2018 Wake Forest game when NC State looked like all they had to do was win out. Wake Forest was the next to last home game. The last 3 teams they played, the coach was either fired that week or fired right after the game. Wake Forest was kind of the last tricky game. It wasn't a very good Wake Forest team. It wasn't a terrible Wake Forest team, but it wasn't a very good Wake Forest team. And, of course, NC State now famously laid an egg. Wake Forest beat them in the last minute of the game with a touchdown pass to a tight end, and NC State lost any chance at a New Year's Six Bowl with that game. And for about a quarter and a half, I had visions of that game going through my head against Syracuse. Because if you noted, I think everybody was paying attention to Clemson Wake Forest, and Clemson laid a whooping on the Wake Forest. And the manner of which Clemson did it, bring back memories to last week about whether or not NC State should have run the football a little bit more, but that's a different story and a different conversation. Um, but B, it gave you say, hey, you Wake Forest on the road, different team. They've lost 2 straight road games now. Lost at UNC, lost at Clemson, Boston College next week. BC is 2-1 since Phil Djokovic is back. The one loss to a Florida State team that is 5-1 in its last 6 games. By the way, that one loss to NC State. Um, the door's open. I got to start by beating Syracuse. It just took for a while, but then the hammer dropped, and you completely forgot about that first quarter and a half, and the last 2.5 quarters was about as enjoyable an ACC game as NC State's had. Certainly this year, I think. I mean, even the games like Florida State and Louisville, Boston College. I mean, those games were kind of competitive up in the air in third quarter. And they certainly pulled away from BC, but this game was over at halftime. It was over. You knew that one-dimensional Syracuse, who really only had 2 plays, right? I mean, they 2 plays gave them almost half of their yards in that game. It was completely shut down. Otherwise, so yeah, I thought it was enjoyable. It was a good day for NC State because it should mention that the day started with the women's cross country team winning the national championship. I want to get that plug in there, and then handling business in that manner gives you hope. Senior day coming up, big game against Chapel Hill, a lot on the line. It's fun. It's fun to be watching NC State football and knowing that you're for the first time in 11 years, you're going into the last weekend thinking, can we make the ACC championship game?
Now, I will caution the fans at home that are thinking Wake Forest just went to Clemson, got their asses kicked. Now they're going to go up to Boston College and lose. It's a 50-50 game, and that's probably with some red-tinted glasses. I think Wake Forest, I'd probably give Wake Forest a 65-35 lean in that game. Wake Forest is the better team. We talk about Wake Forest, maybe they're not the same road team, but let's not compare a big, ESPN nationally televised game in Death Valley to a sleepy noon start on ACC Network in Chestnut Hill. 2 very different atmospheres there. We will see, but I like NC State's headspace going into this last week of the season. They're not focused on what Wake Forest does because you know what? Are you going to think back to the Wake Forest game? You think about missed opportunities if NC State wins against Carolina and Wake Forest beats Boston College, which, both of those results are the expected results. Both of those teams are the favorites. Yeah, you might think about, some of those missed opportunities, particularly maybe in Winston-Salem, running the ball a little bit more. But you finish with a win against Carolina, you move on to 9-3. You have a very successful regular season. You have a regular season that is above the norm at NC. I think, if you're 7-5, you're 8-4. That's kind of a normal good year at NC State. You go 9-3, that has the makings of a special season, and then you could, potentially combine that with a bowl win or if Boston College can take care of business against Wake Forest and NC State maybe finds itself in the ACC Championship game, potentially a conference championship game, then you have the makings of a very historic season. Even if NC State doesn't play in the ACC Championship game, could win against Carolina, could win the bowl game. It would be only the second time in program history the Wolfpack wins 10 games in a single season. That, in and of itself, is a great goal to aim for, but To your point, Matt, it is nice going into the final week of the season knowing that it's not just the rivalry on the line. It's not just bragging rights. There are real implications for this team. I think that plays into the Pack's favor against Carolina. If you're not just so focused on beating Carolina, you're focused on taking care of business, preparing properly so that you can accomplish your end goal this season. I think that maybe, helps the mentality going into that type of game. But let's talk about, some of the special plays that we saw in the Syracuse game. We talked about how enjoyable football it was if you're an NC State fan. You get to see a Drake Thomas pick six. You get to see both Thomas brothers score in this game, which is pretty cool. I mean, if the Thomas brothers don't represent everything that is NC State football, I don't know what does. It's a family-based program. It's the local products. In the case of Thayer, you're talking about a guy that flew under the radar on the recruiting trail, gets to NC State, develops his way from a former walk-on to a potential NFL receiver one day. So, to see both of them find the end zone, plus you get a Bam Knight kickoff return for a touchdown. Is this something that NC State can continue to take into Week 12 or Week 13 rather against North Carolina and into the postseason? Or, I don't know if you can really rely on a Bam Knight kickoff return to get some of your offense. You can't necessarily rely on a pick six, but complementary football seems like NC State in all three tiers of the game is in a great position for these next, 2, possibly 3 games coming up.
I think, the thing that probably it would excite me the most is that you didn't leave that Syracuse game saying, oh, this or that or this, or we got to fix this or that or this, right? The defense was good. The quarterback play was good. The running back actually ran the ball decently well. They didn't get a lot of carries. You and I talked off air on that Sunday. It was kind of a unique game where, there just weren't a lot of plays in that game. Neither team ran up a lot of plays. It was both teams were taking their time getting the play off. There wasn't a lot of hurry up. Syracuse focused more on running the football. NC State got a lot of chunk yardage, as you noted in your notebook. You can go read on the website. NC State, I think, had the best yards per completion and yards per play it's had all season. Your hope is it's a sign that things clicked. It came together. That's not a bad Syracuse team. It's not a good Syracuse team, don't get me wrong. But it's not a bad Syracuse team. They just can't throw the football. But allowing 5 sacks, I think that was the second most they've given up. They've actually been pretty good about not giving up sacks. I think it was the second fewest yards they've gained in a game this year. Their defense has had its moments. They're one of the best in the country at getting tackled for losses and sacks, and NC State completely shut that down. Only a couple of sacks and 4 tackles for loss. And so it does give you a lot of optimism kind of going forward about, I go back to that 2018 team after they lost to Wake Forest. I forget who they played, Louisville, and just destroyed them. And all of a sudden, things kind of came together. And they played UNC in a dogfight, the Reggie Gillespie game, which I think Justin Williams was at, right? Weren't you at that game in Chapel Hill?
I was also in the stands for that game. That was the last NC State game I went to as a spectator, which I will also be at this next NC State UNC game as a spectator. So maybe good news.
And then it all really came together against East Carolina. So maybe there's hope that this is kind of coming together for a nice, strong finish. I'll say this too, because I think a lot of fans have an interest in this. Noon start in November at Boston College, the Saturday after Thanksgiving. It's going to be cold. It's going to be dead. And it's going to be a challenge for Wake Forest to not be asleep to start that game. I'm just saying. Wake is only a 5-point favorite in that game, right? That's the last line I saw. I think they're actually maybe the second or third slightest dog, a favorite, I should say, going
I,
into the
I
weekend.
mean, they know that they have to win to make the ACC championship. You're telling me a Dave Clawson coach team is going to be asleep?
I'm just saying, it's
All right.
not going to be. A lot's on the line. Don't get me wrong, but it's still not going to be an enjoyable environment. I mean, it's going to be freezing cold up there. What's the temperature going to be in Raleigh? Let
Probably
me look at my.
30s. I mean, it's going to be cold in Raleigh too, but there will be fans. There's at least they
Yeah,
got that going for them.
I mean Friday night here in Raleigh, it's going to be 28 degrees, which means probably it'll be freezing at kickoff. In Boston, I'm just saying. I mean, they know they got to win the game regardless. If they lose, either NC State or Clemson's in the ACC title game. So, yes, you're right. It's a must win, and they know that. But BC got that big offensive line. They're going to play two tight ends. They're going to run the football. And when it's freezing cold out there, I'm just saying it could take its toll on Wake Forest. So,
I'm just trying to for the mentals of NC State fans have already gone through enough. They've already gone through enough pain and suffering. Don't set yourself up to think if NC State beats. Look, I'm gonna watch the game on Saturday. I'm gonna watch Wake Forest play Boston
only if
College,
NC State
especially.
beats USC.
Yeah, I'm not gonna watch it. If NC State loses, I'll be watching the Iron Bowl or something like that. But if NC State beats Carolina, I like every other NC State grad or NC State fan that's closely following this football season will be watching the Wake Forest Boston College game. But just don't expect Wake Forest to not take care of business. And if they don't redirect that anger back at the program. Which eventually, of course that'll be the reaction, right? If NC State beats Carolina and then Wake Forest wins the game it's supposed to win, then people will go on Twitter and complain about Dave Doran because that's how Twitter works. But just don't set yourself up for that. And if it happens, great. It's gonna be lovely if it happens. It's gonna be a Thanksgiving miracle. But I don't know. At least there's hope. Just there's hope, but don't expect it to happen. Right? Like when you buy a scratch-off ticket at the gas station, you hope that it's a jackpot. But if you're relying on it being a jackpot, you're gonna have your heart broken every time you do that scratch-off. So that's all I'm gonna say about that. But to the game itself, when we were talking off air a little bit, we were talking about good performance from the rushing game. We finally started to see the rushing game get used more than it was against Wake Forest. But NC State's just not gonna run the ball this year. Are they? They're just going to let Devin Leary cook, and I don't blame it because Devin Leary, fifth straight game with 300 plus yards, 2+ touchdowns. I think that was Syracuse's worst pass defense total all season, or at least against an ACC opponent. So Devin Leary quietly an all ACC caliber quarterback. There's so many good quarterbacks in the ACC. Again, another slight to prepare yourself for. Prepare yourself for Devin Leary to not be an all-ACC quarterback, even though he has the resume of one. And in any other year, he could probably be a first-team all-ACC quarterback. So prepare yourself for that as well. But, going into this next game against Carolina, we talked about a couple weeks ago. These last 3 games, 2 of them are against some of the 2 worst rushing defenses in the conference. One, Wake Forest. NC State didn't run the ball. Second, Carolina. Are they going to run the ball against Carolina?
Find out. I thought they ran the ball pretty well against Syracuse. They should run the ball against UNC, and we'll have of course we'll have our UNC preview coming up here shortly. But I think they should. I thought they ran the ball fairly well. The reason why they didn't get the yardage was just the product of the way the game played out, not necessarily a lack of commitment to the run, which was not the case against Wake Forest. I know, Dave Doran said that's kind of how the game played out against Wake Forest. I just respectfully thought that was just a headstrong approach to throwing the football and taking advantage of the matchup outside, which, by the way, they scored 35 offensive points, had 42 points in the game, and it was just the manner of which he did it. You could probably have gotten that same amount of production scoring-wise running the football, I thought. And
28 offensive points. Or
against
actually, 20
Wake Forest.
27 offensive points NC State had against Syracuse.
Are you talking about Wake Forest?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Against Syracuse, it was 27. But you felt like if they could have scored on every possession by the time the second half rolled around. They almost did, right? Um, so yeah, it was just a slow start. But I hope they run the football more. I thought that a little bit better running the football in this game. And again, that's not a bad Syracuse defense. I mean, I think they held Wake Forest to, among all ACC teams before this weekend, held Wake Forest to the fewest yards Wake Forest had in regulation. Um, so, yeah, I think there was a genuine, curiosity of how much NC State would score. I actually had them scoring 23. I got the Syracuse number right at 17. I had a 23-17 game. Look, I thought this was going to be a challenge. I thought this was going to be similar to La Tech, where it was going to be a very emotional, mental challenge. Uh, there were a lot of beat up guys after that Wake Forest game. I thought this was going to be a challenge. I thought Syracuse would come out thinking this was their chance to get bowl eligibility, which is a big goal for them this year. I mean, these are two different programs and two different tracks right now. Uh, so I was impressed that they were able to easily handle business the manner that they did. So
Well, speaking of anticipated challenges, I think that's a good transition to talk about the men's basketball team, which, speaking of Twitter rhetoric, Twitter complaints, a lot of complaints about this game. NC State, finding itself in a two-half battle against Texas Southern, a team that, you look at the names, you think NC State should be blowing them out. But as I mentioned at the start of this podcast, Matt Carter did his research before this game. He warned me before this game, be prepared for a dogfight for the Wolfpack, because Texas Southern, pretty darn good in their own conference. Tournament team last year. I know they were a 16 seed, but they won their tournament game in the first four. If you make the tournament, if you're capable of winning your conference, I don't care who you are in Division One, you're capable of putting on a good performance against most teams in college basketball. Especially, you look at this year, there's not many great teams. And look at the ACC. There might be just one great team. I mean, there's one title contender, and the rest are fringe Sweet 16 contenders. So, anyways, NC State ends up getting the victory against Texas Southern. Some adversity faced in this game. Jericole Helms fouls out early on in the second half. You were there, Matt. What'd you think of NC State's performance in this game? Just based on what you've seen thus far this season, where would you kind of rank the performance that they played against Texas Southern? Because I didn't think they played particularly bad. I just think they can't really shoot.
yeah, they didn't shoot well. They didn't rebound well. But again, you had to do your research and understand that that's what Texas Southern does. They crush the offensive boards. They're one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country. And as I noted in my quick hits, go back and look at Texas Southern's games this year. Um, First game against Oregon on the road, they were down 10 at halftime, lost comfortably, were defeated. Second game against the St. Mary's team that's good. I don't know if you have to be a college basketball fan probably to understand. St. Mary's is good. Justin's a college basketball fan. He'll tell you, you normally see
I'm
St. Mary's.
a West Coast Conference guy now. My
Yeah,
San Francisco Dons. I'm gonna go check them out later this month.
you normally see St. Mary's in the NCAA tournament, right? Kind of a classic 8-9 game type team. Guess what the score at the halftime of that game was? Texas Southern led 31-28. Guess what the halftime score at NC State was? 31-28. Game was tied with like 10 minutes to go at St. Mary's. The game was tied with about 10 minutes to go with NC State. It's the same story. They led at halftime at Washington from the Pac-12, and the game was either tied or with 8 or 10 minutes to go. They led in the altitude of Air Force at halftime. The game was tied with even less, I think, with like 5 minutes to go in that game. They lost all four of these games by single digits, in which they have led at halftime. It's a quad four win, but if there's such a thing as a quality quad four win, this is the quote unquote definition of a quality quad four win. And even if you had played him on a neutral court, he may even sneak into quad three territory. Um,
You better watch yourself. That might be.
well,
The quality quad four win is slipping me up a little bit, man.
yeah, I mean,
We'll see. This is a game you have to win. It's a game that can only hurt you, but it's a challenge. It's a team that could make it's a game that can make this team better before it faces better competition.
these are the type of quad fours you should play. I mean, they're not. They'll hurt you, yes, in terms of getting that and maybe viewed as a bad loss. And it's really tough because Texas Southern is clearly, I don't know if they have a budget shortfall or something, but they're playing 11 non-conference games on the road. So they have clearly made a strategic and perhaps economical decision to say, you know what, we're not making the NCAA tournament unless we win our conference tournament. So what matters what we do in non-conference play. So let's go fly around the country and have these teams pay us a lot of money to play games in their arena and cash in check after check after check, and and supplement our athletic department budget that way. I mean, it's very clearly got to be a strategic decision on their part, and I quite frankly, I'm not. I kind of applaud them. I think that. I mean, it sucks for the players to have to be traveling around that much, but I bet they don't mind. They get to see a lot of different arenas and play in a lot of different places. So, um, but yeah, this game was going to be a close game. The only other non-conference game left that should not be close is Bethune-Cookman. So fans need to get that in mind. Be prepared. Every game on from here on out. If it's a blowout, other than Bethune-Cookman, because we're starting ACC play here in a couple of weeks with Louisville coming to town, it's either going to be a dogfight or if it's a win, lopsided win, that means NC State played a tremendous game.
I think if NC State blows out anybody, they played a tremendous game this season, and that's not that's not supposed to be a slight. This roster just has a gaping hole in the middle, and that's not to pick on Jalen Gibson. That's not to pick on Ebenezer Dewana. It's not to pick on Ernest Ross. They're just not Manny Bates, and NC State's going to have to find, as you've mentioned, Matt, a new identity to what it's going to be this season. Can it's got a good start with Darion Sebron averaging a double-double every night. You'll take that. You can build around that. And Jericho Helms, you're going to need him to be in the game. Two of the last three games, that hasn't been the case.
Three games in a row now he's fouled out.
And the Oklahoma State game, probably his best game of the season so far. He had a tremendous second half, but was really nowhere to be found in the first half. He's your senior leader. He has to step up. He has to be a star on this team. Darion Sebron has to continue to be productive in transition. Promising signs from Cam Hayes. He had a good game against Texas Southern. No turnovers. I think he had, 3 or 4 assists. Was efficient from the field. Wasn't settling for jump shots. This is an NC State team that I think if it gets frustrated in half court, which can happen kind of easily when you don't have a screener like Manny Bates that makes defenses account for him, it's going to be subject to maybe putting up some dumb shots. And NC State's just not the type of shooting team that can get away with taking these Steph Curry range threes. They just don't have shooters like that. They're going to have to dominate in transition. They're going to have to play solid defense. I do think this has the makings of a team that can be solid defensively, can force turnovers, can get on the fast break. And you just have to rely on a Cam Hayes to really be this point guard that can make everybody else better on the floor, because right now everything's just so locked up in half court. Gotta find a solution to account for the screeners, because right now nobody's rolling with Gibson and Dewana, and everybody's just staying locked up on the shooters like Thomas. It's why you haven't seen anything from Thomas Allen, or it's why you've seen some quiet performances from Terquavion Smith. Now that NC State's playing some more competitive games, those are shooters that need the ball in their hands they need open shots to make shots. And right now they're not getting open looks. Competition's about to get a lot tougher for NC State, as you mentioned, Matt. Here's the stretch coming up. You get a week off basically for Thanksgiving, Louisiana Tech at home. Then Nebraska comes to town for the Big Ten Challenge. Then Louisville comes to town for the first ACC game. You mentioned Bethune-Cookman. Purdue and Brooklyn and Richmond and Charlotte. 4 of those 5 teams could be NCAA tournament teams, or 4 of those 6 rather. I'm throwing out Louisiana Tech. Could be NCAA tournament teams. What do you expect for NC State in this upcoming stretch? Do you think it's prepared to face that competition? Do you think it can hold its weight in this 6-game stretch? Maybe, I think 500, you'd be probably pretty happy with that.
I think that I'd think go to the next game too. Wright State is actually probably on paper just as good, if not better, than Colgate, who just beat Syracuse by 15. So Wright State is the favorite in their conference. Louisiana Tech is one of the favorites in Conference USA. Those 2 teams are probably on par with Colgate, and they're probably better than Texas Southern. So we saw, it's going to be a bunch of competitive basketball games. Yeah, so I would add Wright State and say that by the end of the calendar year, that's 7 games. Certainly, we're going to beat Bethune-Cookman. The good news is you get a lot of these games at home. Realistic expectations for Purdue is to expect a hard challenge there. I mean, let's just be honest. They're kicking butt right now. They just beat Villanova. You can make a case they probably should be the number 1 ranked team in the country right now. Just based on who they've beaten.
Can you stay competitive in that game? Can you stay competitive? Yeah. That's a win in my mind.
Yeah. Every other game on that list is winnable, and every other game is easily potentially slip up. So, I think NC State, best case scenario, you want to come out of your non-conference schedule 8-3. You already got the 1 loss to Oklahoma State. There's going to be no shame at all in that loss on a neutral court to Oklahoma State. I don't think. There'll be no shame at all losing to a neutral court to Purdue. If you could maybe limit it to those 2, then you've really done the best you could with non-conference. Louisville's off to a bit of a sluggish start themselves this season. Get them at home. We'll see. The question is if NC State's playing in the ACC title game that day, because my boy, the Eagles, lived up to my hype of them, and everything fell perfectly. Then I don't know how many fans will be at that Louisville game since it's on the same day at the ACC Championship game. So it's something to think about. See, stuff like that is fun to think about.
It is, yeah. It is awkward. Would you expect as many fans as there were at the Texas Southern game? Because that looked like very low numbers. In fairness, it was a Sunday night during NFL to go watch Texas Southern.
Sunday night, 6 p.m. game, a week before Thanksgiving. A lot of people have work they got to do for a couple of days before they hit the holidays. Probably running errands around all weekend, and so no, I wasn't surprised. Maybe a little. I thought it would be a little bit more filled than that, but you have to remember first game since they lost to Oklahoma State. So, and Texas Southern again. You have to be a college basketball guy to really study the lineups and stuff to probably have appreciated. He's a pretty good opponent. I guarantee you a lot of casual fans still probably would say, barely beat Colgate, and don't understand that that's a quality win. That's going to be a quad 3. It may even sneak into quad 2 territory by the end of the year. So, I wasn't surprised it was lightly attended, maybe a little bit. I probably expected maybe 1,000 or 2 more than showed up, but it's what it is.
Maybe if that's scenario, they can find a way to play that game at noon. Your diehard Wolfpack fans can find a way to get to the men's basketball game immediately, leave before the game is over because NC State's beating Louisville by like 20, and then get on 40, make it to Bank of America Stadium by 5. You can get in a tailgate, and then the game would be at 7:30 for the championship game against Pitt. We'll see. That'd be
time of the Louisville game.
I don't know what time the Louisville game. I got the schedule up. Hold on. It is 2
Oh,
p.m.
like 2 or 4,
2 p.m.
2 p.m.
So
Yeah,
technically
they're
you
not
could
moving
still
that.
do it, but you're not gonna move the. Yeah, that's unfortunate. If only they could play on West Coast time too. Get in like a 9 a.m. game. That'll be great when
Yeah, what
the net.
television? What is that? An ACC network game?
Um, it is ESPN2 on the Deuce.
Yeah, definitely. You ain't moving. You're not moving that game off that time slot. So,
Well, I mean,
that's it.
the good news was that NC State only lost by 2 to Oklahoma State, a team that I do think is pretty good, a team that NC State it fought back. That impressed me, gives me some promise for the rest of this year. But I just think fans should be honest with the expectations of this team. When you lose a guy like Manny Bates, it's a devastating loss. NC State's just been dealt a bad hand with its roster this year. They're going to do the best they can. I hope they go win some games. I hope it's a team that can maybe get into bubble consideration. But to have the standard for this team as an NCAA tournament team that could, sneak into the Sweet 16, like it's just not that type of year. If it becomes that, that's wonderful, and Kevin Keatts should be getting so much praise for that. If NC State makes the NCAA tournament this year, I need NC State fans to come out hard for Kevin Keatts, because if that man gets this team into the NCAA tournament, he's earning his paycheck. Okay, so look, let's just have realistic expectations, and then we don't have the heartbreak down the road. That's all I ask. But let's see what the Wolfpack can do on the non-conference slate, a tough non-conference slate ahead in December. Can they go? What was your pick, Matt? 6-1. Love to see it.
I thought preseason my prediction was 8-3 non-conference. Still think that'll be. I think that's very accurate. I will add this. Uh, in today's college basketball, pay very little attention to November and December basketball. What teams look like. There have been a lot of teams that look really bad in November, December, that find the formula, find an identity, and find something that works. Case in point, Kevin Keatts' first team at NC State that ended up making the NCAA tournament. And so I don't think there's a whole lot of difference between the two teams. It's just a matter of finding the right formula to work and pull together. Um,
You want to see
so,
the team improve as the year goes along. That's how I'm going to judge this team. Can they get whatever happens. But if this team continues to improve and show signs of development, that's what you should be looking for. But anyways, that's going to do it. In the meantime, before our next podcast, we're going to talk about the Carolina game, but you can go ahead and start making your plans for December 4th, that magical Wolfpack Saturday with we'll call it the Matt Carter Saturday, an NC State basketball game in Raleigh, followed by a potential ACC Championship. We'll see if the Pack can take care of business against Carolina on Friday, and we'll see if the Boston College Eagles can also take care of business against Wake Forest on Saturday. That's going to do it for this podcast. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review it wherever you listen to it. Apple, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're there. We're also on YouTube. Please subscribe on our YouTube channel. Give this video a thumbs up. Drop a comment while you're at it. Go to the On3 Network, thewolfpacker.com, for just $1, a year's worth of premium subscription to the On3 Network. Again, that's just $1. Take advantage of that deal. It's not going to be around forever. And follow us on social media. At the Wolfpacker is our main account on Twitter. You can give me a follow at Justin H. Will on Twitter if you care to. And give us a like on Facebook, NC State Wolfpack on thewolfpacker.com. So for Matt Carter, this is Justin Williams, and this has been the Wolfpacker Podcast.